Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Transform with Travel podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Tolliday, and I am so grateful that you are here with me today. Today's episode is going to be a very data-driven episode, and that is because we have been looking at the top searched terms over the last few weeks. And historically, without fail, every 4 years post-election, there is a massive surge in people searching how to move overseas. And this is not a political episode. I'm not going to get into my feelings about the election, but truly, the data shows that people are interested in other options, other ways of living. People are recognizing that the option, the life that they've been living currently is not the only option available to them. My friend Megan McCaskill beautifully just said that quote to me, and I was like, oh, got all the goosebumps from that. And it shows in the data. Every 4 years during election season, no matter which way the outcome swings, people are searching how to move abroad. And after this last election, in the 24 hours after the polls closed on the East Coast on Tuesday, like Election Tuesday, the searches for how to move abroad went up by more than 1,000%. US searches for move to Canada increased by 1,270% alone, just in the 24 hours after the polls. And so today I was just thinking, man, I've actually moved abroad multiple times. I've studied in Europe. I've studied in Central America. I moved to Australia. I moved to Thailand. I kind of have a interesting perspective on what it takes to move abroad. And I've done it a lot. I've moved back to America, which is a whole nother slew of reverse culture shock issues. And it takes a lot more than people realize than just doing a quick Google search, clicking book, and going. I wish it was that easy. And if it feels that easy, then you might be missing some crucial steps. And so the point of this episode today is to give you my top 8 steps that you really don't want to miss out on, or the things that you really need to consider before making the move, to have in place before making the move, because this is what's going to help you feel supported before, during, and after. And this is not just moving abroad. This could also be you deciding to travel for an extended period of time or spend 3 months in a certain country. And then when that tourist visa runs up, then you move on to another country. And so it's not just specifically moving overseas. It could also just be spending significant time outside of your home country. I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of a US citizen moving to another country, but a lot of these steps that I'm going to provide to you, these 8 tips, it can be fairly universal to a global audience. So just keeping that in mind, that I'm coming from my personal perspective as a US citizen and what it was like to move to 4 different countries over the last, 15 years. And with that, also a bit of a disclaimer, I am not a legal expert. I am not a tax expert. I'm not an insurance expert. This is just personal experience of what it took for me to move 4 different times to 4 different countries, move back to my home country, and what I wish I would have known. I mean, a part of my first big move to Australia, I was 21 years old. So some of these things weren't even relevant to me back then because I didn't even know it was important. And I wish that I had this checklist before. So I'm going to be sharing with you my 8 things that you need to consider before moving overseas. And something to remember is next week, next Tuesday, I'm actually going to have a legal and tax expert come on the podcast to talk about how to protect yourself legally and financially if you're going to be making a move overseas or spending significant time outside of your home country. So stay tuned for that episode with Lauren Klein next week. But today, let's get to work. So, number 1 is your visa. No matter whether you're just going to be a tourist, whether you're going to be a remote worker, whether you're trying to be a permanent resident, you need to consider the types of visas that are offered in the country that you want to go to. And I guess even before you start any of this is, why do you want to go to this specific country? What about it draws you in? And trying not to have this like romanticized rose-colored glasses on about the country. Like, what about it does it offer that you really want to experience? So first and foremost is the country you're going to. Why? Why? Then ask again, why? but why? Just keep asking yourself and get to the root of why you want to move, why you want to go to that specific country, and then understand, does this country even offer a visa that allows me to work either in the country, work as a remote worker? There are laws in certain countries, even if you're remote working for a US based country, there are laws that prohibit you in certain countries for doing that. Can I be a tourist for a specific amount of time? Do I have 90 days? Do I have 180 days? Certain countries have full year digital nomad visas where you can live there, you can work there. Some countries, if you buy land, you automatically become a permanent resident. So just getting really clear, and you might need to work with an immigration attorney in that country to figure out what visa is going to work the best for you and potentially your family if you're traveling with a family. We'll get back to the show in just a moment. At the end of every episode, I always ask my guests what their favorite must have travel item is. And I want to take a quick moment to share with you one of mine, a travel companion that's just as essential as your passport: Arch Rome Right Travel Insurance. Whether you're exploring the vineyards of Italy or trekking through the Andes, travel is thrilling and transformative. But sometimes unexpected events can put a pause on our plans. That's where Arch Rome Right steps in. With a focus on specialized travel insurance solutions, they're here to assist you in navigating those unforeseen travel hiccups. I once was stuck in the middle of an island in Indonesia during a massive earthquake, and we lost personal belongings, 3 months worth of accommodation, and we racked up expenses with last minute flights and hotels. I only wish I knew about Arch Rome Right travel insurance back then. From trip cancellations and medical emergencies to lost luggage and delays, Arch Rome offers insurance plans that cover what matters most, and most importantly, gives you peace of mind. Each plan is backed by Arch Insurance's strong financial ratings and a team dedicated to exceptional customer service, recognized for their expertise and responsiveness. But what truly sets Arch Rome apart? Their innovative approach combines state of the art technology with real human experiences, providing you with transparent and swift service. Join the millions who trust Arch Rome and make your next trip a little smoother. Head to the show notes to find and use my personal affiliate link to get a quote today. Thanks to Arch Rome for supporting our show. Number two, if the reason why you are leaving the US is because you're fed up with the political system or fed up with the way that the election turned out, please make sure that you are still registered to vote. Whether you're traveling, whether you're living long term somewhere, stay registered to vote. Apply for a mail-in ballot, an absentee ballot. When I was living in Australia, I was there during the 2016 election. I voted at my desk in my office in Sydney, and I mailed it in. Especially if you are just upset with the way that this election turned out, or whatever way you swing, stay registered to vote. Have your say in the country that you were a citizen of. It's just so important. And also, like, what happens in the US trickles out to the rest of the world as well. So where you're living in isn't immune to what's happening in the US. So stay registered, have your say. Number three, if you are trying to buy property in a new country, so Costa Rica, if you buy land there, you have full land rights. You can become a permanent resident if you invest a certain amount of money into that land. So knowing your land rights, there are certain countries through Central America, through Asia, where you need to have a local citizen have a partnership with you to own that land. And that local citizen might have to have 51% ownership. Some countries, they don't even let foreigners invest in land. You can lease the land for 99 years. So getting very clear about what your rights are as a landowner if you're going to invest in property in those countries. Also knowing your renter's rights if you're going to rent over there, knowing which type of visa you need to be able to do that. So you need to be a permanent resident in order to rent, getting very clear about what your rights are as a renter. Number four is kind of goes in line with the visas and what you're allowed to work, but what are you going to do for work? Are you a remote worker? Do you make US based money in a US based account? How are you going to access that money? What kind of transfer or transactional fees are there to move US based money into your, let's just say, Portuguese bank account? Is there an issue with the currency exchange? What's that going to look like? You're going to lose a bit of money on currency exchange if you're transferring large amounts of money from US into your new country's currency. So just keeping all of those things in mind. Number 5, talked about this a lot with Lauren, but do you have a will in place? Do you have a plan in place? Do you have a healthcare surrogate? Are these documents recognized in the country that you're spending significant amount of time in? That's a huge thing. Number 6, schooling. If you're traveling with your kids, what are you going to do for school? If you're going to homeschool, are you registering them within your home state in the US and making sure you're doing all the reporting to be able to keep them passing each grade? Is there flexible schooling in the country that you're moving to or spending time in? And can that get registered within your state? Are you moving with a program that offers schooling? I mentioned in the episode Boundless Life. I'm going to have Elodie, the co-founder, on in December. Stay tuned for that. Just paying attention to what you're going to be doing for schooling and how that's going to be legally recognized either in the US or in the country that you're living in. This episode is brought to you by Bite and Coffee. Many of you know that my husband is Australian and I lived in Oz for 5 years. I knew when I moved back home I would miss the incredible Australian cafe culture. And then lucky for me, Bite and Coffee opened in my own hometown. Bite and Coffee is owned by the absolute best couple from Down Under, Dan and Kat, who moved to America with the dream of opening up a true blue Aussie cafe. Bite and Coffee offers up the best coffee, Aussie meat pies, sausage rolls, delicious sandwiches, and homemade pastries and desserts. They also have fun community events like trivia, karaoke, expat nights, and more. If you're living or visiting in South Florida, be sure to check out Bite and Coffee, located in Lighthouse Point. That's BYTE and Coffee, located in Lighthouse Point. Okay, number 7, health insurance. Before you get rooted in your new community or settled into your new country, you're likely going to have a period of time where you don't have a more permanent health insurance plan, right? You haven't had a chance to look into their health insurance policies, or you might not even have the right to a health insurance policy if you're not a citizen or a permanent resident yet. So you need to make sure that you have some sort of gap coverage in the meantime. Perhaps it's working with a travel insurance provider that also has medical insurance included that you get from your home country. Perhaps you're working with your own US-based health insurance plan that has a travel policy, just making sure that you're covered in the state, in the country, or the place that you're moving to, or the place that you're spending significant time in. If you're not permanently moving to a new country, and you're just traveling for extended periods of time, travel insurance is going to be such a peace of mind for you to know that no matter what happens, you're going to be covered for the most part. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard horror stories of fellow travelers where they get really sick, or even just they break their leg. They were on a hike and they broke their leg and they didn't have insurance, and it was a trip ender for them because they were supposed to be traveling for a year, and this happened. They didn't have the funds to pay all the bills and they had to go back home. And another thing to think about is, what are you going to do? Let's say you decide, I'm going to go spend my year in Spain, but you have family back in the US that you need to come back and visit, let's say for a month or a couple weeks. What are you going to do insurance-wise when you come back home to the US? What if you get sick or there's a minor car accident? All of these things are things to think about. How are you going to cover yourself when you're overseas? Travel insurance is the best way to start. And how are you going to cover yourself when you come back home to the US? Once you get yourself settled and you have more of a permanent situation, maybe you have a permanent resident card or your digital nomad visa might allow you to have private health insurance in the country that you're going to, or perhaps they allow for Medicare. You need to start having conversations with experts in these areas to figure out what your goal is, how long you're planning on being away for, what that means for your US health insurance, and what that means for yourself being covered overseas. I know that when I first moved to Australia, before I figured out where am I going to be staying, where am I going to be working, do I even have access to their private healthcare plans, because I wasn't a citizen, I couldn't apply for Medicare, I got travel insurance and I had a way to keep me covered in that respect. It's just important to make sure that you have yourself covered, especially if you're traveling with kids. We all know how regularly they can get sick, and it's just important to make sure that you have coverage for that. It's not to go into worst case scenario or get really nervous about everything. It's just really thinking through all of the things that could happen and making sure you're covered so you're not hit with a $50,000 bill from a hospital and your beautiful, romanticized, amazing life overseas has now come crashing down because of something something that just could have been mitigated to start with. And then the last point, number 8, is what I just said. Are we romanticizing the country and the experience that we are heading towards? It's so important to have dreams. It's so important to lean into the positivity of the experience that we want to have. But we want to make sure that we're not hyper romanticizing this country, and making sure that we have a plan B should that area, should that city, should that country not be what you expected it to be to live in. It's one thing to visit. It's one thing to be a tourist. It's one thing to stay in a 5-star hotel and think that that city is everything that that 5-star hotel offers. But what is it like to actually live on a day-to-day basis? Do you have a plan B? Do you have a support network there? Are you reaching out to expat groups and starting to make friends and community? Having a plan B in case something happens and you decide, I want to leave and go to a different country, or I want to return back home. What's your plan B? Make sure to stay tuned for next week's episode with Lauren Klein, because she's going to be really going over all of the legalities and tax implications, the nitty gritty, like the real nitty gritty of what it means to move overseas. She has over a decade of experience of working with international clients, moving to the US clients moving internationally. She is probably one of the most best sourced people that we could turn to in a time like this. And make sure to stay tuned for that. If you haven't clicked subscribe, do that now so you'll get a notification so you don't miss the episode. And if you are leaving the US and you're starting a new life overseas, and either you're traveling long term or you're inserting yourself into a new community, I hope that this experience is transformational. I hope that it's everything that you wish and hope it to be. I hope you got the nitty-gritty covered so that you can lean into how amazing and powerful this experience can be. I will see you on another episode of Transform with Travel. If this is an episode that you think is going to be super powerful for a friend, for a family member, please share it with them. That is the best way that you can send me some love right now. I am sending all of the love out to you. If nobody has told you today, I am so proud of where you are right now. And let's keep on moving forward and have a positive outlook. I will see you on the other side. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Transform with Travel podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode of inspiration, adventure, and exploration. If you felt inspired by this episode, please rate and review in whatever streaming app you're listening from. This allows us to spread the word even more and continue to serve up weekly doses of adventure. As always, we'd love if you could share the episode with someone in your life who you think will benefit from this conversation. Thanks so much for listening. This is your reminder to get out there and keep on exploring.